Live from Las Vegas, this is the 2016 Senatorial Debate, presented by 8 News Now, in partnership with Entravision.
Tonight, we are live at Canyon Springs High School in North Las Vegas for the first and only senatorial debate in Nevada. Good evening and welcome. In just a moment, your 2 Senate candidates will face off. Republican Congressman Joe Heck and Democrat and former Attorney General of Nevada, Catherine Cortez Masto. Thank you both for being here tonight. I am 8 News Now anchor Denise Valdez. I'm joined by Politics Now co-host and Review Journal columnist Steve Sebelius, and also Univision's Washington, D.C. anchor Tatiki Felix. This debate is being broadcast not only here on Channel 8, but across the state at Reno's CBS affiliate KTVN, live on C-SPAN, online at LasVegasNow.com, KTVN.com, NoticiasNevada.com, as well as KNPR. And it will also re-air Sunday on Univision's Entravision's KINC in Las Vegas and KREN in Reno. And if you would like to take part in the debate or see additional information about the questions we'll be asking tonight, you can look for the hashtag you see on your screen, which is NVDebate. All right, now for the rules. There are going to be 3 parts to our debate tonight. First, we're going to be asking both candidates a question. Then the candidates will ask each other a question. And finally, we have individual questions for each of them. We're going to start with questions for both candidates. Each of them will have 1 minute to answer, and then each candidate will be given 30 seconds for a response. If there's any follow-up questions by the moderators, a candidate will have 30 seconds to answer. A timekeeper will also let you know when you have 15 seconds left. They're on either side of the stage tonight, and then a bell will ring when your time is up. Now, in an earlier coin flip, it was determined that Catherine Cortez Masto will be asked the first question, and since there are no opening statements tonight, we'll get right to the first one. By the time outgoing Senator Harry Reid was elected to the Senate in 1986, he'd served 1 term in the State Assembly, 2 terms as a lieutenant governor, chairman of the Gaming Commission, and 2 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. Ms. Cortez Masto, you are a 2-term Nevada Attorney General, but you've never served in any legislative branch in the state or the federal government. Can you explain, if elected, how as a new junior senator, you'd be able to maneuver through the Senate halls, secure federal funding, and also the influence that Nevada voters have come to expect?
Thank you for the question. And first of all, let me say thank you to KLAS, Univision, everybody who's here in the audience and those watching. We so appreciate you hosting tonight and have the opportunity to talk with you. No, that's a great question. And, you know, as Attorney General, I was in a unique position. I got to introduce legislation. And so I introduced over 40 bills during the 8 years that I was in office, and those bills were supported and passed out of our legislature with the support of Democrats and Republicans, and always signed by a Republican governor, because I think that's what is missing in Washington. It's bipartisan problem solving. We need to focus on what's happening in our communities, how we address those issues, and then how we work together. If legislation is necessary, how we work together to move forward and address those concerns that I see every day from working families here in Nevada.
Thank you, Congressman Heck. You are a 2-term U.S. Congressman. You served 1 term in the Nevada State Senate, and since you've been in Congress, you have not passed a budget or comprehensive immigration reform. So the same question. Can you explain how, if elected as a new junior senator, you'd be able to maneuver through the Senate halls, secure that important federal funding, and also the influence that Nevada voters have come to expect?
Well, certainly, again, I want to offer my thanks as well to everybody who's sponsoring the debate and everybody who's here tonight to participate. First, my time as a state senator gave me the background and understanding of how to work the legislative process, and I was successful in getting legislation passed during my time in Carson City. During my 3 terms in Congress, I've passed multiple pieces of legislation in bipartisan way. In fact, all of my bills have passed with overwhelming bipartisan support out of the House, the Senate, and signed into law by a Democratic president, each one of which addressed a specific issue important to the people here in Nevada. Because I've had the opportunity to serve in Washington, D.C., I've been able to build relationships, not just with members of the House, but with members of the Senate. So as I get over to the Senate, on the Senate side of the campus, I already have relationships with many, on both sides of the aisle, in order that I've been able to pass my legislation already that I've introduced, and I'll be able to leverage those relationships in being able to continue to work in the best interest of Nevada's people.
Thank you both. Our next question is from Steve.
Well, there seems to have been one big news moment after another involving the presidential candidates in this race. Over the past couple of days, we've been in the field with a poll in the presidential race. It shows Democrat Hillary Clinton narrowly leading Republican Donald Trump. Now, like it or not, both candidates are linked to the presidential candidate of their party. Congressman Heck, just 6 days ago, you called for Donald Trump to step down from the race. He has said many offensive things over the past 15 months that probably gave you pause. Why only now have you withdrawn your support from him?
Well, the decision that I made last week was a very personal decision. I've served in the Army Reserve for over 26 years, and I've tried to live my life by not just a military code of honor, but a personal code of honor. It's what I owe my family. It's what I owe the people who elected me to represent them in the halls of Congress. And as an emergency department doctor, I've taken care of far too many women who have been victims of domestic violence or sexual assault. And I have great empathy for anyone who ever had to experience such a tragedy. You know, my wife was the victim of domestic abuse in a prior relationship. And so the decision I made was an extremely personal decision.
Congressman, thank you. Ms. Cortez Masto, you stated that Secretary Clinton has your support because, quote, she is the champion Nevadans need fighting for us in the White House. However, the director of the FBI testified before Congress that Hillary Clinton lied to the American people about how she handled her emails when she was Secretary of State. Why should your fellow Nevadans trust Hillary Clinton, and what does it say about your assessment of people's character that you're endorsing somebody that the director of the FBI has essentially called a liar?
No, thank you for the question. Look, Hillary Clinton has recognized and taken responsibility for those emails, recognized a mistake, and said she wouldn't do it before again. There's no doubt in my mind that she has the temperament, the experience, and the ability to lead this country as commander-in-chief. But let me talk about something that Congressman Heck just said. You know, it is astonishing to me that for 9 months, he was Donald Trump's biggest supporter. When Donald Trump was attacking POWs, when he was attacking Gold Star families, Congressman Heck had no problem with Donald Trump's finger on the button. When Donald Trump was making fun of the disabled, attacking Mexicans, calling them rapists and criminals, and calling women names and denigrating women, which we know why he was, because he thinks he can sexually assault women, Congressman Heck had high hopes that Donald Trump would be the president. So let's call this what it is. Congressman Heck is worried about his political career. Donald Trump's ship is sinking, and Congressman Heck is scurrying off it in a desperate attempt to save his career.
There's the bell. I have a hunch that Congressman Heck, you'd like to respond to that. That won't count against your time, sir. Please give a 30-second response.
Well, certainly, as I said, this was a very personal decision for me to make, not a political decision. And I find it incredulous that my opponent would continue to support somebody as trustworthy when the vast majority of the American people have found her not to be trustworthy. This is a woman who put our national security at risk by keeping classified information on an unsecured server in her basement. And when my opponent was asked whether or not she would consider using a private server, she said she wouldn't want to speculate about that. This is a woman who lied to the families of the people lost in Benghazi about why they lost their lives as American patriots, because the equipment and material needed to keep them secure was not provided by the State Department.
Congressman Heck, there were 50 national security advisors, Republican security advisors, who think that Donald Trump is a security risk, and they're not supporting him. But you were still supporting him. Again, you can't walk away or run away from him right now. You don't get credit for that. You were with him for 8 months, and it is a desperate attempt for you to save your political career.
Desperate attempt? 15 seconds.
Certainly not a desperate attempt.
That won't count against your time either.
And likewise, my opponent continues to support somebody who has been deemed untrustworthy by the majority of Americans, lied to the families of the victims in Benghazi, and kept classified material on her private server, risking national security.
All right, thank you both for your answers.
We've got certainly a lot of enthusiasm for the issue. So let's talk about an issue that is very important to that state, to our state, and that's immigration. Tatiki?
Yes, you both say you are for immigration reform. Both of your plans include securing the border and a path to citizenship. We hear a lot of general statements such as bring people out of the shadows and keep families together, but not a lot of specifics. Catherine Cortez Masto, please tell us at least one specific aspect of your immigration reform plan that is different from your opponents.
Well, I can tell you, first of all, thank you for the question, and this should be a priority in Congress. My grandfather came from Chihuahua, Mexico. Because of his courage, he crossed the Rio Grande, served in our military, and became a United States citizen, and then brought his young family from Las Cruces, New Mexico, to Las Vegas for the opportunity to succeed, work hard, make sure your kids have every opportunity.
And
that's
how
no
would you
different.
achieve that
That is no
specifically?
different than the people in this state. There's a family right here that I've talked to, the Wee family. They're here, they're fighting to ensure that their kids have every opportunity. And yes, it is about ensuring that we put them on a tough but fair path to citizenship. It is bringing them out of the shadows. It is ensuring they have that opportunity to have a job and not worry about being deported. They just want that opportunity. And here's the thing. We know passing comprehensive immigration reform would contribute to our economy, and we could still address the border security in this country. So this should be a priority. And for me, it is a priority. And as your next United States Senator, this is something I will be focusing on.
Follow-up question for you. How would you specifically tackle border security since you brought it up?
That's a great question. As Attorney General here for 8 years, I work with state and local federal law enforcement, always concerned about the security of the people in this state. Listen, we already know with respect to border security, we've got 21st century technology, whether it is drones, it is satellites. The technology we can use now can help us address the border issues. We've put funding already into the border for bodies and resources, and we want to continue to do so. But at the end of the day, let's not get caught up in the specifics of border security where my opponent wants to go. Because let me just say, it is about passing comprehensive immigration reform and not arresting dreamers when they show up at your office asking you to move
Congressman
forward.
Heck, the same question to you. Give us at least one specific. You'll get your time. Give us at least one specific aspect of your immigration reform plan that is different from your opponent.
Well, likewise, my maternal grandparents immigrated here from Italy to give their family a better life. My grandfather worked in the Brooklyn Navy Yards, then started a small bricklaying business that grew into a family business. And if it wasn't for them taking that risk, I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I have here today. I can't say what's different from my opponent, because she hasn't ever said what her strategy would be for comprehensive immigration reform. However, I would say that one of the things that we must do is address our legal immigration system. If we don't fix our legal system, we will continue to have the problems that we face today. The fact is, when somebody does come through the legal channels and becomes a permanent legal resident, or even gets citizenship, they shouldn't have to wait 10 to 12 years in order to bring their spouse or their family over. So let's talk about fixing the legal immigration system as well. Let's develop a robust guest worker program that meets the unmet demands here in the United States, while not disenfranchising unemployed Americans. Both unskilled and high-tech, we have critical needs. Let's work, as I did, in drafting legislation with many members that are probably in the audience tonight, to come up with a way for dreamers to get a path to citizenship. These are the issues that I would concentrate on over and above border security.
Congressman Heck, you know where we differ. Listen. Congressman Heck, you know where we differ, because I support the bipartisan version that passed out of the Senate, and you opposed it. There's a clear distinction between the two of us. And you know what? When you're talking about passing immigration reform and helping people, you don't vote to defund DACA. You don't sign on to sue the president over DACA and DACA. And I'll tell you what, when you have an opportunity to move this issue forward in the House and have a vote on it, all you had to do was sign a petition, and you refused to even lift a pen to sign that petition so it could go forward for a vote.
Congressman.
Well, certainly, so the comprehensive bill that came out of the Senate never came up for a vote in the House, and I did call out my leadership for not moving forward on immigration reform. In fact, an article was written by Stephen Sebelius pointing that fact out in the Las Vegas Review-Journal. So we need to work towards comprehensive immigration reform. I do not support a 2,000-page bill. I support addressing each piece of immigration reform individually. I'm sorry?
Deportation as well?
No, I have never talked about deportation. I believe that when we talk about the 11 to 12 million undocumented that outside of the Dreamers, that those that have a criminal past should be deported. However, those that have been working in our community should be given a path to some type of legal status.
Congressman Heck, your record is your record, and your votes are your votes, and
we're
lack
going to move on
thereof.
to another
You can't run for
tonight.
them.
And I also want to remind the audience, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is our one and only chance to talk to these candidates. And if you continue to interrupt, that goes against their time. So I appreciate, please be respectful of them. Steve has our next question.
Our next question comes from Colleen Jeffrey. She wrote in via Facebook, and she wants to know, quote, would they support a government shutdown, end quote. Back in 2013, there was a government shutdown. Here's a look at some of the consequences of that. Federal workers who live here and work at the Nevada National Security Site and government office buildings and military installations were furloughed. Some of our top tourist destinations were closed. There was also the threat of a stop in benefits for programs like food stamps and unemployment claims that Governor Sandoval called, quote, catastrophic, unquote. We're going to do something a little bit different with this question. I want you to raise your hand if, as a senator, you would commit to never shutting down the federal government, whether through inaction or inaction.
Well, Congressman Heck's already done it. He's voted to shut down the government and continued with the sequestration, so I don't know why he's raising his hand.
Well, there was never a vote to shut down the government. There was never a vote to shut down the government.
We'll come to you in a second. Congressman Heck, you voted in, back in 2013, there was a dispute over the Affordable Care Act. And the government almost was shut down, or actually was shut down for 16 days. So is she right? Have you already done it?
No, there was never a vote to shut down the government, and I voted for every piece of legislation to open the government back up, and voted for legislation to safeguard the pay and benefits for our military members so that they would not have to worry about getting their paychecks. So there was never a vote to shut down the government.
You said, and this will be a 30-second follow-up, you said at the time, kind of minimized what was going on at the time, calling it a slowdown in non-essential government services, but some of the things on the list I just read sound pretty essential to me.
Well, when there is a pathway by which, when there is a government slowdown, that certain non-essential services are curtailed. But again, there was never a vote to shut down the government, and I voted for every piece of legislation to open the government back up, and voted for the legislation to safeguard the pay and benefits of those in jeopardy.
Listen to what he's saying. He's talking about a vote, because he's trying to dance around the subject. He supported the government shutdown, and then he continued to support it, voting 16 times for the sequestration. He can't run from his record.
Sequestration had nothing to do with the government shutdown.
He cannot
Two
run
separate
from
items.
It. And so it's a typical Washington politician trying to dance around the question. And that's what's the problem with Washington now. We need people that are problem solvers, that are working together to ensure we're impacting the lives and doing a better job of helping working families in this country, in this state. Listen, I get around the state and talk to them. We've had the worst foreclosure crisis we've ever seen. And I fought not only on the national mortgage settlement, but 7 and 8 other banks and financial institutions, because when people are suffering in your state, you fight for them and you ensure you're doing everything. And because of that, we brought over $1.9 billion in relief to homeowners here. There's a homeowner in the audience right now, Lola. We helped save her home. But that's what you do, and that's what's missing in Washington right now.
We're going to talk about the housing issue a little bit later.
All right, moving on now, let's talk with another question with Tatiki.
Yes, on the ballot this November is question 1, which would require nearly all gun sales or transfers to be subjected to a background check by a third party. We commissioned a poll and found that Nevadans support the measure by 51% and 38% opposed. Ms. Cortez Masto, do you support question 1, and will you support universal background checks on a national level?
I support question 1, and let me say this, my husband and I are gun owners. My husband's a retired Secret Service agent. I was born and raised in Nevada. My father and my uncles and my cousins all are hunters. But you know what we have in common? We're responsible gun owners, and we know we have to reduce gun violence. And by passing question 1 and supporting it, we can expand those background checks, we can close those private gun show loopholes, and we can ensure we're doing everything to reduce that gun violence. But you know what? It requires us at a federal level also to address this issue. And one of the common sense things we could have done is made sure we passed a law to ensure that terrorists on no-fly lists or on terrorist lists can't buy a gun in this country. But Congressman Heck opposed it. He wouldn't even vote for that, to reduce gun violence in this country.
Thank you, Ms. Cortez Masto. Congressman, same question to you. Do you support question 1, and will you support universal background checks on a national level?
Yeah. I do not support question 1 because I feel it doesn't really address the problem that we face. The issue is not the legal gun owner. The issue is that the records necessary to run background checks aren't in the background check system, and that's why I supported legislation that provided additional resources to the states to get the records necessary into the system to actually run an adequate background check. In addition, we need to prosecute those who go to a gun store and try to purchase a gun when they know they're not able to do so. We prosecute very few of them. Likewise, we need to stiffen the penalties on the third person or straw man buyer, the individual who's purchasing a gun to give it to somebody that they know is not able to hold a gun. Then we need to address the mental health issue. You know, if you look at all of the tragic mass shootings that have occurred in this country over the last decade, they were all committed by legally purchased guns by individuals who underwent a background check. What we're doing by trying to pass this legislation is put a Band-Aid on an issue without addressing the root cause. Let's really talk about the mental health issues in this state and in this country and provide the resources to take care of those individuals.
Before moving to the response, Congressman, thank you. Is that your decision, even though the polls showed that 51% support this measure?
It is my decision, but when you look at the measure, it is very ambiguous, and it would criminalize people from lending a gun to somebody else if they weren't at an established gun range. There's no definition of established gun range, which means in many parts of Nevada, people go out into unpopulated lands, BLM lands, to go and target shoot. That's not an established range.
Ms. Cortez
So
Masto,
the
how
law
would you
is very
respond?
ambiguous and would criminalize otherwise legal activity.
Well, it's again a typical Washington politician trying to come up with a root cause. Well, let me tell you, we're already addressing the straw buyers. We are already enforcing the law and arresting individuals. What we need is more people working together to reduce the gun violence and expanding that background checks, closing those private gun show loopholes. Listen, I don't think somebody should be able to buy a gun over the internet, but Congressman Heck does. That's the difference between here. We need people that are working on common sense solutions to get things done in this country. And yes, do we have a mental health issue we should address? Absolutely. But that requires people in Washington to continue to fund the services we need for mental health in this country. Congressman Heck votes with the Ryan budget. And they cut services for treatment, for mental health, for addiction service, you name it. He's part of the mess. He's voting with his Tea Party and the right wing 9 times out of 10 when he's in Washington.
15 seconds to respond, Congressman.
So I have taken a proactive approach in trying to address the real problems associated with gun violence, working with Democrats to increase resources for the background check system, making sure that we increase penalties and prosecute those who illegally purchase firearms. And we recently passed comprehensive mental health legislation out of the House of Representatives to provide the services necessary, as well as a comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act to provide services to those that have substance abuse problems. Those are the issues we need to address most urgently if we truly want to decrease the propensity for gun violence in this country. As we've seen, the acts that have occurred were done by those who purchased guns legally.
Congressman Heck, you just said that you have voted for and supported all of the issues you had concerns about. So now's the time to pass question 1 and address the background check issue, make sure individuals cannot buy guns on the internet. And for this one is astounding to me, and you must pass a law at the federal level to ensure that terrorists on no watch list or no fly list can buy weapons in this country.
The terrorist no-fly list is a political ploy put up by the other side in order to try to score political points. The fact is there's only about 1,000 U.S. persons on that list. And in fact, even the American Civil Liberties Union is against it because there's no due process. And we know that many people on that list are on there with no good reason. In addition, the Federal Bureau of Investigation does not want that to happen because it prevents them from initiating investigations on people who might be on the list when they get the tip.
Thank you both.
I need to
Well,
remind
Congressman
the
Heck, it
audience
sounds like you
one
have
last-
your
Ms. Cortez
typical
Masto, we're moving
Washington
on to another
Republican
topic.
talking points
And this-
down on that issue.
We're moving on to another topic because we've got a lot of information to cover tonight. Audience, I really appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're taking time away from your candidates. We're going to give you plenty of time to applaud at the end of the program. Right now, here's something you all care about, and that's taxes. We're talking about the economy, specifically taxes. In fact, this is a question that comes from Mike Evans via Facebook. He lives here in Las Vegas, and he wrote, I would ask both that with all the tax increases, when is enough enough? So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this question. This is a multi-part question, so bear with us. The question will appear on the monitor in front of you so you can follow along. First, we just want a quick answer. We're looking for a dollar figure here. We're going to give you the full minute to respond to the answer. So the first question is going to Ms. Cortez Masto. This question will come to you. At what income level do you consider a family to be middle class? Just a dollar figure.
Well, I can tell you here the median income for people here in the state of Nevada is $52,000 a year.
Okay, based on that, do you support raising taxes on top wage earners, and at what income would that start at?
Well, let's talk about that, because here's the challenge we have in this country. We have working families that we know that paycheck doesn't go as far, and instead of giving them tax breaks, which I've talked about, is giving $1,000 tax breaks to the working families here so they can keep more of their hard-earned money. And you know how we pay for it? Well, we ensure we're not giving tax breaks to big corporations that are shipping jobs overseas. We take away the unnecessary subsidies to big oil, and we pass something like the Buffett rule to ensure that millionaires and billionaires aren't in a lower tax break than their administrative assistants. But we need people in Washington who are looking out for working families, not those big corporations. Congressman Heck is working for the big corporations. All of his votes in Congress have been to support big corporations, unnecessary subsidies for big oil, and he is not looking out for working families that are still struggling here in the state of Nevada.
Can we get a number from you? Because Secretary Clinton is actually proposing raising taxes on $250,000 or more. Is that a figure that you're comfortable with?
I think that's something that we need to start looking at in this country, how we ensure we are bringing families out of poverty. I mean, if you're making minimum wage in the state, you're making $15,000 a year.
Is there a number you have in mind?
No, I think that's something we need to address here in this country. I'm absolutely willing to look at that. If that pulls people out of poverty and does a better job for the working families here in Nevada and across this country, I would absolutely take a look at that.
Okay, perhaps Congressman Heck has a figure in his mind. Again, we've got that question for you here on the monitor so you can follow along. Looking for sort of a two-part question here. At what income level would you consider a family to be middle class?
Well, that's geographically dependent. Here in Nevada, as we know, the median income is about $56,000 a year. But in other high-cost areas around the country, middle class is much higher. In fact, Joe Crowley, Democrat member from New York, became quite perturbed when it was mentioned that $110,000 would be considered middle class for his constituents in New York City.
But you're right, it is $52,000 here in Nevada. So let's talk about what it would be for top wage earners, and at what income does that start at for you, and would you consider taxing those people?
Look, we need to reform our tax code in general, make it fairer, flatter, simpler, so that everybody can fill out their income tax on one sheet of paper, get rid of loopholes, deductions, subsidies. Nobody should get away without paying anything, whether you're an individual or a big corporation. Everybody should be paying something into the Treasury to support that man or woman who's wearing a uniform, picking up a weapon, and standing opposed, keeping our liberties and freedom safe.
So it doesn't sound like you have a top wage earner that you're looking at to tax, because Mr. Trump is proposing across-the-board tax relief for everybody.
I think we need to make a fairer, flatter, broader tax system that gets rid of loopholes and deductions and lowers rates, especially for the middle class.
Okay, so neither one of you have a hard figure. Last 30 seconds on this topic, Ms. Cortez Masto.
No, it's typical. He doesn't answer the question and dances around it. I'm absolutely willing to explore Hillary Clinton's proposal, but here's my concern. I know he's concerned about the people in New York, but I'm concerned about the people here in Nevada. I want to make sure that if we are going to talk about doing this, we're pulling these working families out of poverty. Do I have a figure for you right now? No, but I'm absolutely willing to explore it to ensure we're fighting for the families here in Nevada.
Okay, Mr. Heck, final 30 seconds on this.
Well, I find it hypocritical that I didn't answer the question when she didn't give a number as well. Look, the fact is, we need to do everything possible to make our tax code fairer, flatter, and broader, getting rid of unnecessary loopholes and deductions, and lowering tax rates for all Americans to spur economic growth, create better-paying jobs, and lift people out of poverty.
A lot of work to do on that topic, it sounds like. Now let's move on to our next question with Tatiki.
Yes, let's take a look at your views on judicial appointments. Many have questioned Chief Justice John Roberts' ruling on Obamacare. It caught many people off guard that a conservative justice ruled in favor of the law. So should it be a litmus test for judicial confirmations? And if not, what is your litmus test for a Supreme Court justice, Congressman?
So I do not have a litmus test on any one given issue for a Supreme Court nominee. I want to look at the jurist's history during their time on the bench. I would prefer to support somebody who will interpret the Constitution as written, uphold the Constitution and our freedoms and liberties, and not attempt to legislate or rewrite the Constitution from the bench in order to fulfill some political agenda.
So are you saying you don't have a specific criteria for a Supreme Court justice?
I have no specific individual issue litmus test for any jurist. I will judge them on their history on the bench.
Ms. Cortez Masto, you will have a moment to respond.
Yeah, listen, there are characteristics and individuals that I like and admire, like Justice Sotomayor and Justice Kagan. But for me, I'm looking at somebody who has an understanding of the rule of law, can apply the law fairly and equitably. And also, we need a more diverse bench, right? We need to ensure that we're putting justices on there that have a real-world application, because we know it impacts people every day in their lives. But let me just say, it's astonishing to me a Congressman Heck doesn't say he has a litmus test when he's on record saying that the type of justice he's looking for is somebody that is like Justice Scalia.
Do you have a response to that, Congressman?
Well, there's no response. I mean, I can point out specific justices, just like she did Sotomayor or Kagan. We all have justices that we believe represent our views. That's not an issue litmus test. That's an individual personality.
Thank you both.
But it is, because if you're looking at somebody like Justice Scalia, who we know is very conservative and would overturn Roe v. Wade, that's a concern for many people across this country. And so we need to know where Congressman Heck stands. And if he's looking at the mold of Justice Scalia, that is a concern.
We're going to move
Justice
on to the next
Scalia
topic.
upheld original theory, which is my primary doctrine, interpreting the Constitution as written and not rewriting it from the bench.
Thank you both.
Steve, you have the next question.
Thank you to the audience for applauding my next question, which is about the Affordable Care Act. Now, according to the Health and Human Services Department right now, more than 73,000 people in Nevada are enrolled in Obamacare. However, premiums here and across the country are skyrocketing. In some states, it's going up by more than 50%. This issue now has both Republicans and Democrats calling for changes, including former President Clinton.
So you've got this crazy system where all of a sudden 25 million more people have health care, and then the people are out there busting it sometimes 60 hours a week, wind up with their premiums doubled and their coverage cut in half. It's the craziest thing in the world.
And just this week, one of the more liberal governors in the country, Democrat Mark Dayton of Minnesota, said, quote, "The reality is the Affordable Care Act is no longer affordable." Now, nearly every survey, Americans say they want to keep three key provisions of the Act: no lifetime limits on coverage, allowing kids to stay on their parents' insurance until they reach age 26, and no denial of coverage because somebody has a pre-existing condition. So, Ms. Cortez Masto, to you, specifically, where would you start to fix the skyrocketing cost of premiums in Obamacare?
No, it's a great question, because we know here in Nevada, Governor Sandoval created the Silver State Healthcare Exchange, expanded Medicaid, so we have more people that have insurance in this state. And listen, I know getting around and talking to people about this very issue, there is a frustration, rightfully so, by Nevadans, and we can do more. But it starts with a reform-minded approach, working together to keep what works, what you just talked about, Steve, and then fixing what doesn't, like repealing and addressing the Cadillac tax and the high premiums that we see. But that's where we need to start, is a reform-minded approach. My opponent wants to repeal it. We don't need to go through another divisive fight over health care in this country when we know there's things that work. If he repeals it, there's 300,000 Nevadans who are no longer going to have health insurance. We're going to go back to the day when being a woman is considered a pre-existing condition, and he would open up the donut hole for Medicare Part D for seniors who need that insurance. So this is an issue that we need bipartisan problem solvers.
Congressman Heck, you have voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act, but assuming that the Affordable Care Act remains in place, what ideas do you have, specific ideas, to fix the high cost of premiums?
So as a member of Congress, I've introduced replacement legislation. My position has been to repeal, repair, and replace, and offered a replacement vehicle to address the most egregious portions of the health care law that have resulted in actually less access to health care and higher premiums. Remember, some people may have received insurance, but that doesn't mean you get access to health care, and that's really the critical issue. People have bought policies on exchanges not knowing it had a $5,000 deductible until they went to use it for the first time. We all agree we want to keep the consumer protections that are within the health care law. Nobody should be dropped the day after they get sick, or nobody should be non-renewed because now the insurance company thinks they're too old and too much of a risk. So what we need to do is move away from the mandates and the penalties and incentivize and provide increased competition. Instead of telling somebody you buy a policy as approved by the government or we're going to tax you, we should give people a tax credit to go out and buy the policy that works for them and their families with the coverages that they need. We should allow them to use health savings accounts, something that the Affordable Care Act actually took away. And we need to put the $700 million back into Medicare that the Affordable Care Act took out.
But listen to what he's saying. What he's saying is we will repeal the Affordable Care Act. We're going to make sure we have a profit-centered approach for health insurance companies and doctors. We're not talking about preventative care anymore. The premiums are going to skyrocket under his plan. And that's the difference here. You know, again, he's a typical Washington politician. He likes to define the issues, but he doesn't come up with real solutions to the people that I see every day that are struggling. Listen, I don't think that if you are living in this country that you should die because you can't afford health care. And I don't think that you should, let me finish though, because this is such an important issue. And I don't think that you should unfortunately go bankrupt because you can't afford your medical bills. It is an issue we need to address in a bipartisan manner.
Let's give Congressman Heck a chance to respond. Congressman, you still want to repeal the Affordable Care Act?
I want to get rid of the pieces that don't work and replace it with pieces that actually increase access to health care. You know, let's remember that when this bill was passed in 2010, it was pushed through by Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi. You know, my opponent is Harry's handpicked candidate. No difference in how she would support this good law. But the fact is, while there were Republican options and ideas, they were not even given the opportunity to be offered. There are ways that we can lower costs and, more importantly, actually increase access to health care. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference if you have an insurance card if you can't see a health care professional.
Ms. Cook. Real quick, 15 seconds.
No, it's still more of the same. I mean, he's continuing to talk about how others force this down the many Nevadans who have insurance now, but he doesn't talk specifics about what he wants to repeal. So why do we need to repeal it? If we want to improve it, let's keep it where it is and improve what doesn't work. So that's the discussion that we should be having.
In case my opponent didn't hear me, I said I would repeal the mandates and I would repeal the penalties. And I would rather incentivize somebody with a tax credit to go buy the policy that works for them and their families and has the coverages that they need and want.
Okay. And you repeal the mandates and you're going to give higher profits to the insurance companies. There's no doubt about it.
All right, we need to move on, but thanks for your answers.
Well, I think our audience is really going to like this portion of the debate. So just again, a reminder one last time, please hold your applause. We really want to hear from our candidates tonight because in this part of the debate, we're going to allow the candidates to ask each other a question directly. Here's how it's going to work. You'll have 20 seconds to ask the question, a minute to respond, and then 30 seconds for the other to rebuttal. Joe Heck, you may ask the first question of your opponent.
So I would ask, what, if anything, should the United States do to combat China's territorial assertion in the South China Seas, especially in light of the recent Hague decision?
No, it's a great question, and I think many of us have to ensure we're going to have a president that's going to hold China accountable. Listen, we know there are our relationship with China is complicated, right? There's some areas we work together, like in North Korea and the Climate Accord, and there's other areas where we compete. And we know with trade alone, they've put the United States at a disadvantage with their currency manipulation and what they've been doing in the South China Seas. But because of it, we need to ensure we have a commander-in-chief who's got a steady hand, who understands those complexities, and can hold China accountable. That's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a national security risk. We've seen it in the security advisors who aren't supporting him. My goodness, Homeland Security Advisor Michael Chertoff is voting for Hillary Clinton, and he's a Republican appointed under Donald Bush. That's why it was disappointing to me that you were continuing to support Donald Trump when you know he's a national security risk and he has no business being commander-in-chief.
Congressman Heck, you've got 30 seconds to
So
respond.
as President Obama has rebalanced to the Asia Pacific, this is going to become a critically important issue, not just to our own economy, but global trade and to communities right here in southern Nevada. We have to make sure that there's freedom of navigation. $5 trillion, roughly 30% of global trade passes through the South China Seas. And if we don't have the ability to utilize that maritime passage, we will lose good-paying jobs right here in Nevada. In addition, our allies in the area, the Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, Vietnam, are very concerned about their national and economic security, and the large Filipino and Vietnamese populations right here in southern Nevada are worried about the impact on their families in the region.
Ms. Cortez Masto, 15 seconds to button this up.
Sure. No, let me just say, again, he sounds good, but at the end of the day, he's supporting Donald Trump. And to me, you know, that's a security risk. That's not somebody who's going to be able to take on China. That's not somebody. Listen, Donald Trump said that we should go to war with China because we need unpredictability. This is somebody that Congressman Heck supports.
I don't think my opponent has been listening to the news for the last week.
Let's give you a chance now to ask. Ms. Cortez Masto, let's give you an opportunity now to ask Congressman Heck a question.
Sure. Congressman Heck, you supported the government shutdown. And while the government was shut down, federal employees were required to work without pay. During that time, over 200 congressmen donated their salaries to charity because they wanted to support those federal employees. You did not. How did you feel cashing your paycheck when air traffic controllers and law enforcement did not have enough money and were struggling to pay their bills?
Well, first, again, there was no vote to shut down the government. And after the government reopened, Congress actually passed legislation to provide everyone who lost pay while they were furloughed their full pay and benefits. So we took care of that issue after the fact.
So let me address this, because here's a true leader, Congressman Heck, and here's what you should have done. You should have donated to charity. You know, when I was Attorney General, for 8 years, the legislature started cutting the salaries of my employees and state employees by 6%, and there were mandatory furloughs. I returned and gave back $44,000 of my salary so that I could stand in the shoes of my employees and take the same 6% cut that they took. That's leadership.
Congressman Heck, you've got some time to respond.
Well, donating money to charity would not have paid the bills for those individuals who are on furlough, which is why we passed the legislation to actually provide them the pay that they lost so that they could pay the bills.
All right. We want to give each of you a chance to sort of smile tonight and pause. So before we move on to the individual questions, we've got one more question for both of you. This one's a little bit more personal, to give our voters a chance to know who you are behind the political persona. Ms. Cortez Masto, you can answer first. We wanted to know, at what moment did you know that your husband, Paul, seen here on the screen, was the person you wanted to spend the rest of your life with?
Oh, that's easy. On our first date. On our first date. He was working as a Secret Service agent. We met thanks to President Bill Clinton, who was here at the time. And he asked me out on a date, and he said, like a good attorney, I asked you out for dinner, and you negotiated for lunch. We actually went out, and we've been together 19 years ever since.
Congratulations. Congressman Heck, the same question for you. I understand that you and Lisa have been married for nearly 21 years now, if my math is correct. At what moment did you realize that she was the lovely woman you wanted to spend the rest of your life with?
The moment I met her at a hospital Christmas party. Interestingly, I knew it was fate, because as we met, I'm a doctor, she's a nurse. We started talking about where we were from. We were both from Pennsylvania at the time. We both went to the same college at the same time, hung out in the same places, and we never met. We met out here in Las Vegas roughly 8 years later. It was fate, and I knew the day I met her at that Christmas party.
a little something personal tonight. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Now, in this portion of the debate, we're going to question the candidates individually. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. The panelists may ask a 30-second follow-up question at their discretion. There will be not a response from the other candidate.
So, Congressman Heck, the first question is for you. Members of your campaign and your son have recently been in the news lately for comments that they've made. A BuzzFeed story highlighted many disturbing comments on your son's Reddit account. And 2 of your former aides questioned your opponent's Mexican heritage. And finally, a state Republican Party staff member confused Black City Councilman Ricky Barlow with Black State Senator Kelvin Atkinson in a tweet attacking your opponent. Now, while we understand you did not commit these actions yourself, many voters told us they feel that that reflects on your character. So what do you say to minority voters who are thinking about voting for you but are still concerned about these comments?
Well, certainly the former staff members, they are former staff members. And the state party person does not work for me, so I cannot control nor talk about what they may have done as private citizens. The actions of my son, we've apologized, and so has he. And anybody who's had teenagers knows that as hard as you try to raise your children to be the best they can be, it's not an easy task. So I thank you for your concern about my family, but we need to move on from this issue, and my son has learned from it, and hopefully will become a better person because of it.
It's tough for some voters to think that someone so close to you might have some comments that really offended them. How do you respond to that?
I'm sorry?
It might be tough for some voters to have someone who was so close to you have those type of disparaging remarks. So how do you respond to those voters to earn them back?
Again, it's not something that he ever heard in our household. It's difficult as a teenager, especially living in the fishbowl of public life as the son of an elected official. And that's why he apologized. He's seeking help for that issue, and he'll become a better person because of it. The key thing is you love your children, you stand beside them, you support them. It's not always possible to have them turn out the best as hard as you try, but you stand behind them and you don't give up.
Thank you. Next question comes from Steve.
Ms. Cortez Masto, the housing crisis likely impacted more Nevadans than probably any other issue. No one disputes that banks and mortgage companies were involved in creating the problem. You yourself referred to the county recorder's office as a crime scene because the numbers of fraudulent documents that have been filed there. So my question is, why did no one go to jail over these crimes?
No, I think it's a great question, and that was the frustration that not only did I have, but many of my colleagues, attorneys general across the country, when we were talking with the federal government. There should have been criminal actions at the federal level. Here in the state of Nevada, we did everything we could, both criminal laws and challenges and civil. Listen, not only the national mortgage settlement, but there were over 9 litigations that I pursued as the attorney general against big banks and financial institutions, and we're able to bring over $1.9 billion in relief to homeowners in this state because we know people were struggling. We were the ground zero for the foreclosure crisis, and I took some of that money and created the HomeAGREN program, which still exists in the Attorney General's office, to help homeowners for free. They can sit down with a HUD-certified housing counselor and get legal aid for free to save their homes. That's what we did in Nevada, and we took every action, both civil and criminal, to hold people accountable with our state laws. But the federal laws at the federal level, believe me, with my colleagues across the country, we had conversations with DOJ, and we were disappointed, just like everyone else.
You say, and 30 seconds to respond, you say that you did everything you could civilly and criminally, but nobody went to jail over this. Are you concerned that people in those positions may feel that they can pay a fine and sort of buy their way out of personal accountability in doing things like that?
No, it's a great question, and yes, I can. At the federal level, the big banks. Absolutely. We've seen what happens when they entered into agreements at the federal level that they just had to pay a fine, and now that's their cost of doing business. Here in the state of Nevada, we brought criminal action, and not only did we pursue individuals here, listen, you're not going to win every case, but it was important that we pursued that action to let people know we were going to hold them accountable, and if they're going to violate the laws of the state, I was going to come after them.
But there were no convictions. Nobody went to jail.
Not with the criminal actions that we had. There were some that did, but not the big banks. We actually pursued them civilly. We didn't have the teeth to pursue them at a federal level. That's federal law enforcement that would go after them, the Department of Justice. I did everything I could with our state laws here.
Okay, thanks for your answer.
Because our audience has been so polite tonight, we have a little extra time for one more question. As part of government policy, the United States is currently accepting refugees from Middle Eastern countries. In fact, this year, we're on pace to have a record 85,000 refugees enter this country. The Pew Research Center estimates that half of them are Muslim. Now, Patricia Jeffries had this to say to us on our Facebook page: "Stop the refugees coming into our state and coming into our city." So, Congressman Heck, this question is for you. Focusing on specifically the refugees, are you comfortable with the current process being used by the FBI to vet these refugees? And if you're not, how would you change the process?
Thank you for that question. I'll get to that in a second. I just want to address the housing issue because while my opponent holds herself out to be the champion of those that were suffering in the housing crisis, she told John Ralston in an interview that she was not engaged in the multi-bank negotiations, and that, quote, the cake was already baked when the settlement was done. In addition, the $2,000 to $3,000 that each person may have received from the settlement was probably enough to help them pay for the movers as they lost their home and went on.
That, but let's try to get to
as to the refugee crisis, the issue is simple. We heard, I sit on the Intelligence Committee, we heard from the directors of the FBI, CIA, and National Intelligence that they did not have the ability to adequately vet individuals coming from the current region of conflict. And we should not let anybody in here unless we know they are not going to do us harm. There are other ways that we can handle this. Through the United Nations, we should set up safe havens within the region and provide humanitarian support there. Keep them closer to their country of origin so that when the conflict is over, they can return to their homes. We should have an active role in that. Look, the United States is the beacon on the hill. We've accepted people for many years, for decades, for centuries, that were fleeing persecution. But in this case, we have to make sure the first and foremost responsibility of the federal government is to keep this nation safe.
Thank you. Ms. Cortez Masto, are you currently comfortable with the current process being used by the FBI to vet these refugees? And if not, are there changes that you have in mind?
Yeah, let me address first the cake is baked, because this is, again, a smear tactic by my opponent and his allies, who we all know have been fact-checked independently as false. Listen, I was not part of the initial settlement for the National Mortgage Agreement and the Executive Committee, and I was frustrated that we were not Nevada was not at the table. When the settlement came out, that's when I talked about, listen, the cake was baked, but then I was going to continue to fight to improve that settlement, and I did. That's why the Attorney General from Washington, who's a Republican, McKenna, who was on the Executive Committee, came out and supported me and basically is on record saying I improved that settlement for the state of Nevada and across the country. Because that's how you get things done, and you're working in a bipartisan way. So let's address the refugees. Listen, I, like everyone else, I think we need a strong, thorough vetting process in this country, working with our law enforcement, with the FBI, with Homeland Security. But at the same time, we know many of the refugees, particularly coming from Syria, are women and children who are fleeing for their lives from ISIS. So we can address the human rights issues and be humanitarians. Neither is mutually exclusive. We could still have a strong vetting process. I'll tell you what, as Attorney General, I woke up every day concerned about the security of the people of the state and worked with state and local and federal law enforcement and had briefings from Homeland Security. But let me finish, because this is a concern that I have.
I'm afraid you used your time earlier to finish talking about the housing crisis. So, Mr. Heck, you've got 30 seconds here to respond.
Look, again, the primary role of the federal government is to keep this nation safe. And we heard from the directors of the primary security organizations in this nation that the vetting process was not adequate to ensure our safety. Therefore, individuals coming from the region of conflict should be held in the region of conflict in humanitarian safe havens under the auspices of the United Nations, with the United States playing an integral role in that effort to make sure that when the conflict is over, they can return to their country of origin.
Ms. Cortez-Masto, just 15 seconds here.
If Congressman Heck wanted to keep this country safe, he wouldn't have introduced the JOLT Act. The JOLT Act had national security concerns. It weakened the tools that law enforcement needs to combat terrorism. Homeland Security Department, State Department, and even some of Congressman Heck's own Republican colleagues objected to those security concerns in his bill. And you know what he did? He ignored them. He was arrogant enough to think that he knew better.
Let's find out if he did ignore them.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the JOLT Act was a bill to increase international travel and tourism, which is the lifeblood of Las Vegas and this country. And we did so by actually increasing the security safeguards for those coming to the United States by mandating biometric passports, by increasing the use of the ESTA program. So we actually increased the security safeguards for those coming here and trying to increase the economic benefit brought by international travel and tourism.
All right, thank you both for that. I'm glad we had time to get that question in. So for the very last part of the debate, each candidate will now have 30 seconds to make their closing statement. And Congressman Heck, you get to go first tonight.
Great. Again, thank you all very much for everybody who made this debate possible tonight. You know, our state and our country faces some critical challenges. A sluggish economic recovery, threats to our national security from home and abroad, a crumbling health care law with fewer choices and higher prices, and an education system that's failing too many Nevada students. As a business owner, soldier, doctor, and father, I want to use my real-world experience to address these most important issues on behalf of all Nevadans. So I humbly ask you for your vote for the U.S. Senate. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you.
We're not done yet. We'd like to hear from Ms. Cortez Masto. How would you like?
Thank you so much. I was born and raised in this state and honored to be the Attorney General for 8 years. And during that time, I had the opportunity to sit down and hear the stories of some of the most vulnerable members of our communities, from women and children who were sexually exploited, to families and seniors who were defrauded by banks and notarios, to victims of domestic violence. And I made it my mission to ensure I was fighting for every single one of them, because we can't tolerate leaving anyone behind. And that means continuing to fight in Washington. I will tell you what, I'm not going to change. I will continue to fight on behalf of working families here in Washington. That's why I'm asking for your vote for the United States Senate.
We want to thank you both for joining us today for the United States Senate. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the audience. Thank you for your patience. And don't forget to vote early. It starts on October 22nd, and the general election is November 8th.
Now, throughout the debate, we put a lot of information about the issues we spoke about tonight on social media. You can look for that by using the hashtag #NVDebate. And coming up next here on Channel 8, we will have our one-hour post-debate special with reaction from political experts, undecided voters, and viewers. Thanks so much for joining us. And audience, now you can applaud.